Mountains of History 2.0 was a 3-year program for teachers across western South Dakota, including those who teach in some of the nation's most geographically isolated districts. Teachers worked online to learn and become part of a community of educators. They also traveled together to experience the power of place. Earning up to 12 hours of graduate credit in history or education from Black Hills State University, these teachers were further challenged to become historians themselves. They researched in depth papers or curriculum plans of their own choosing. Mountains of History 2.0 was federally funded through the Teaching American History grant program. Program design, delivery, and evaluation brought together 5 South Dakota partners: Technology and Innovation in Education, Black Hills State University, the Cheeseman Foundation for Democracy, and 2 national visitor destinations that teachers were able to experience in a new way: the Crazy Horse Memorial Mountain Carving and Mount Rushmore National Memorial.
Years from now, if I look back on all the classes I've taken, this one's going to take the cake. Just being able to tell people like, oh yeah, I had a college class at Mount Rushmore, it's not a big deal or anything.
Dylan Huskin was a second-year teacher on the Rosebud Indian Reservation when he began the program, highly motivated to help his Lakota students know their people's history better.
The ghost dance is going to spread throughout the plains.
And motivated also to become an historian himself, Dylan was able to take new knowledge from the program and put it to immediate use.
Anytime I have an aha moment in a Mountains of History class, which is quite often, I make sure I write it down and I try to implement it immediately or as soon as possible as it applies to my class.
Kim Smiley, teaching at Red Owl, appreciated the program's emphasis on primary resources and was able to get her students excited about them.
Primary sources, they love seeing those online. I'm much more apt to point that out to them, that this was written right when somebody, they experienced this very thing, and that does affect the way they're learning. And they kind of dig those things out too.
The program's first year especially stressed American Indian perspectives in history. The massive Indian Museum of North America at Crazy Horse Memorial was a good resource. Black Hills State University's Jace DeCory helped teachers understand traditional Lakota thinking.
We came from Mother Earth out of the Black Hills. And so when we go to Wind Cave, or we go to any cave in the Black Hills, we think of that emergence. We think of when our people once lived inside Mother Earth. And we think of the time when we emerged. And we live now a different life on top of Mother Earth. We once were, now we're common people, common women, men.
Donovan Sprague, employed both by Black Hills State University and Crazy Horse Memorial, spoke with remarkable credibility because of his own family's close connection to Crazy Horse.
As a youngster, he was not well known, and he was also from a family that was not like hereditary headmen type, and he probably wasn't really expected to do the great things that he did.
For Kim Smiley, the program helped her direct her elementary students differently.
A couple of my 4th graders and my 5th grader were reading the book Code Talkers, about the Navajo Code Talkers. And there was something in the back about Kit Carson, and it was from the Navajo point of view. Well, the boy that was reading it has read about Kit Carson, and he's a hero, to the white people, he's a hero. But the Navajo point of view was totally different. And we had a real discussion on that, and I don't know that before Mountains of History I would have been comfortable bringing that up to him and thinking about the 2 different views. But it's more, now I'm more aware of how really our textbooks are written from one interpretation.
At Union Center, K-8 teacher Terry Barry included Native perspectives both in her research paper and instruction about South Dakota's Missouri River dams, developed in the 1950s.
I think it's important for them to know why those dams were built, and then also the consequences of the building of those dams, and lead into all the Native Americans who were displaced, all the reservation land that was flooded, which is a very big part of South Dakota history that I think is untold, and I think it's important for students to know both sides of that.
In the second and third year program, emphasis shifted to Mount Rushmore, how and why the sculpture was created, preservation of historical artifacts, and the lives of Presidents Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, and Theodore Roosevelt.
Teddy Roosevelt discussion as related to Mount Rushmore was pretty engaging, I thought, because we have to look at Roosevelt in contrast to the other three gentlemen. And really, as a 20th century president, he's different. Why is he up there? So we wanted, in one sense, talk about, does he deserve to be up there, and try to learn about his legacy as president and see how he fit with the other people. Having said that, I thought one of the most interesting parts of what we did about Roosevelt was the notion of power of place. What made him who he was? What developed him into a man? What made him become this president of the United States, deserved to be on Mount Rushmore? With our field trip connecting to the Badlands of Theodore Roosevelt National Park, I thought that made a lot of sense to focus on that aspect of his life, how that affected him, how that changed him, how that built to his presidency, and then ultimately his achievements as president.
Teachers looked at Lincoln's presidency by delving into a biography by George McGovern, former U.S. Senator from South Dakota.
McGovern's book prompted a lot of great discussions both here at Mount Rushmore and online. I think the teachers were especially impressed by what a hands-on President Lincoln was in running the Civil War. They were also intrigued to learn how the Emancipation Proclamation played into the strategy of that war. Something else McGovern described very well was Lincoln's lifelong depression and how he had to persevere through that disability in his years in the White House.
In all cases, teachers were asked to drop preconceived thinking of who these presidents were and to ask themselves whether each merited inclusion on Mount Rushmore. Dylan Huskin reflected on Theodore Roosevelt.
I don't know if he deserves to be up there, but I get it a lot more why he's up there. All the images that are, the things that come to mind when you think of Roosevelt, the preconceived notions, were definitely dispelled by this class as you learn more about his character, the things he strove for, the things he did in his presidency. I mean, these are only things that you kind of hear about but you don't really know about. And through this class, I feel like I actually have an understanding of his presidency rather than just a vague knowledge.
Coming face to face with the massive carvings and with colleagues was always fulfilling. But teachers also developed an appreciation for the program's online component.
Discussions were more in depth, like I said, people that normally be introverted or feel like they never get a chance to say what they really want to say because of certain ways discussions can go, just if people are sitting around together. I think people can guide the discussion where they want. They can always put in their say. And like I said, people are a lot more comfortable sharing on the online aspect. And in the end, it's their responsibility. What I love about online discussions, there's no excuse. Not like, well, so-and-so was talking the whole time, so I couldn't, pipe in. It's like you're responsible for what you want to say and how you want to respond. And that really contributes to a lot of original ideas.
The online I'm really comfortable with after doing it for 3 years. It's fun to get to know the people through the discussions and to hear their view. I mean, I guess I kind of compare it to what Oprah does with her book discussions, because you can bring up different questions and everybody interprets it a little bit differently, and then you get kind of off on a tangent.
Being in South Dakota, the weather or road conditions, things get canceled, things get moved around. I think the online component is such a reliable part of the class, a dependable part that you can always go back to and you can always learn from. And I really can't imagine the class without it.
Project leaders were impressed by how effective the arts became in illuminating history for these teachers. Art ranged from other history-themed sculpture to filmmaking to live performing arts. Teachers met Theodore Roosevelt as portrayed by Illinois actor Joe Wiegand. His performance was staged in a Black Hills Opera House built during Roosevelt's presidency. Roosevelt reappeared when the class traveled to Medora, North Dakota, where the future president ranched in the 1880s. This and other end-of-the-school-year trips revealed the remarkable power of place. At Wyoming's Fort Laramie, Nebraska's Fort Robinson, South Dakota's Wounded Knee, and North Dakota's Medora and Badlands.
This is excellent because of the fact that it's not a one-time shot. It's not something that you read in a textbook, because textbooks don't actually give you the whole story behind it. Going through experiences like this where you actually get to go to places, it gives you the story plus the story behind it and the story behind that, which gives that much more knowledge. That makes them, as historians, they're storytellers, and they're able to tell the story in a much more meaningful way for kids to understand. And when you get the kids excited about it, learning happens.
Anecdotal testimony indicates teachers and their students were impacted by the program in ways expected and perhaps unexpected.
It's affected how I teach writing also, not just how I teach history, because now because I've been immersed in this, having to write a paper, and I'm more aware of what it takes for the kids to be able to find enough information. And are you going to be able to get that covered in just a page? Are you going to have to narrow your topic?
I've been able to leave that textbook behind and get all kinds of new ideas from the instructors and from the other people that we get to talk to and the other teachers at the classes.
In addition to the feedback we got from teachers, the anecdotal stories they told us about how this has changed their teaching, we did have a formal evaluation done on the project conducted by one of our partners, and that was the Cheeseman Center for Democracy. And each year they would submit a final report to me, and then I would take a look at that report and submit the findings to the federal government. And really what that did was put the hard data to what we already kind of knew from the teachers, that their level of content knowledge was increasing. And so through pre-testing and post-testing, we saw an average jump of about 20% on the mean in terms of those tests that the teachers took each year.
Project Director John Swanson and Project Manager June Presler, both with Technology and Innovation in Education, convened design team meetings that determined program content and delivery methods. Their coordination kept the program on track, and weeks after it concluded, they reflected on its success.
One of the absolute priorities of the project was that an educational organization had to partner with some kind of history organization, a museum, university department of history, a memorial, which we did. And I think those local partnerships with Mount Rushmore, Crazy Horse Memorial, the Cheeseman Foundation for Democracy, Black Hill State University, those relationships, those partnerships, I think are long-term. And I think there were friendships formed, fellowships formed, collegiality among everybody that was involved. That's the legacy for me, is to see that sustain itself, not necessarily with outside funding, but just through the relationships that were built among the partnerships and the teachers themselves.
I think when it comes to professional development, one of the most amazing things that can occur is when the people you're involved with change. Mountains of History brought change to our teachers in 3 ways, and they seemed to embrace it. It wasn't as if they fought against the change, but they brought it into their practice and their lives. I believe our teachers changed as educators, that as educators they are now bringing the stories of our past and our history to life in their classrooms in ways that they hadn't done before. Many of them talk about using primary source documents and getting students involved in a passion for the story of the past. And as educators, they see themselves empowered to help students do that. I believe they also changed in their vision of themselves as historians. Most of our teachers did not perceive themselves to be historians prior to this experience. Recently, we've had teachers contact us to say that university professors have called them to discuss their history research projects. Former governors have called them to talk over their research, and that makes the teacher historian feel different and changed and empowered as a leader in the classrooms. Finally, I think that Mountains of History, despite its historical significance and its focus on history, helped our teachers see themselves as 21st century learners. Because we brought in technology and asynchronous and synchronous learning into their professional toolbox.
Well, I was headed out west on Interstate 90, not too worried about what what lay behind me. So much was just up ahead. Voices to be heard and lines to be read, yeah. Some wounds are still so fresh, where they tell their stories in bone and flesh. Some landscapes ring so true they pull me in. Are they gonna get you too? I'm going to South Dakota, aren't you coming with me? Yeah. They got a distant horizon and mountains of history. Rushmore carving against a needle sky, crazy horse pointing where his people lie. I stood in saloon number 10 where Wild Bill finally folded. Saw tailings good and bad from when the Black Hills golden. Down toward Fort Robinson the cells were harsh, and up at Medora, Teddy's ranch, the soldiers marched. Well, the Missouri was a highway and the railroad grew. Broken treaties carved the land up and the people too. Some things are sad reminders, what should never be. No one will forget Wounded Knee. I'm going to South Dakota, aren't you coming with me? Yeah. Well, they got a distant horizon and mountains of history. They got mountains of history, yeah. Mountains of history, yeah. Mountains of history. Mountains of history. They got mountains